She gave her heart to save the realm. He gave his last breath to save hers. The dawn over Aeloria is the color of steel. Clouds lie heavy atop the mountain crown, a hush before snowfall, and the ice palace rises from the cliffs like a cathedral carved by winter itself. Within its halls, frost etches ferns across the crystal windows. Chandeliers hum with the quiet music of ice. At the first bell, Commander Rye kneels on the steps before the throne. He bows his head until his breath fogs the polished floor, his palm pressed over the scars crossing his heart. "My life for yours," he says, the old vow steady as a heartbeat. "My warmth for your will." On the throne of living crystal sits Queen Serayne, white gold hair braided like falling light, a circlet of frost resting against her brow. Her gaze is still water beneath a frozen lake. She gives no sign of hearing him, yet the great hall breathes in time with her, a slow inhalation of cold, a slow exhalation of snowlight. "Rise," she says at last. Her voice carries the cleanliness of winter, the clarity of it, and something like distance. It skims the air without touching. "What news from the southern ridges?" "Tracks at the pass," Rye replies, standing. "Wolves and men beside them, hungry, desperate. We escorted the villagers back behind the wards." "Good." Her eyes drift to the windows, where dawn begins to thread pale silver through the storm. "The wards will hold." "They always have," Rye says, and because he cannot help it, "Your Majesty." Her gaze returns to him. "You doubt?" "I do not." He swallows the rest, the way the air seemed subtly warmer on the mountain, the way the snow was not as stubborn under his boots, the way the wind carried a scent he could not remember since he was a boy. Wet earth, sleeping beneath ice. There is a silence that has lasted a century between them. He wears it like armor. He turns to leave, but the queen's bare hand lifts from the arm of her throne. Cold light halos her fingers. "Commander." He faces her again. "There is a shimmer in the sky," Serayne says. "I felt it in the night. The seal is uneasy." Rye's chest tightens. "If the gods stir, we reinforce the gates and hold the lines, as we have always done." She nods once. The crystal throne creaks, frost knitting itself tighter across its surface. "As we have always done." He wants to tell her that he dreams of rivers. He wants to ask if she dreams of anything at all. But that path is dangerous. The oath in his bones burns when he steps too near it. So he bows and turns, the weight of the hall pressing against him like cold water. Outside the throne room, the palace corridors cut in long prisms of blue and white. Frostguard sentries bow when Rye passes. He notes their stances, the way chilled mail bites exposed wrists. He is a commander of habits. Check the gates, check the south parapet, check on the kitchens because good soup keeps soldiers alive. The sun hadn't reached the high windows in years, and yet today, through a seam in cloud, a blade of light finds his cheek. He stops without meaning to, lifts his face. Warmth, faint as a held breath, skims his skin. A trumpeting horn cuts the moment, not the palace horn, a village horn, high and reedy, carried strange and thin on the wind. Rye runs. The outer gates crack open at his command. Snow churns under boots. The world is a white ocean. Before the path descends to the valley, a shape lies sprawled in the drift, small, limp. Rye's heart slams once. He is there in 3 strides, dropping to his knees, hauling the bundled figure up against him. A child. Girl. Perhaps 6 or 7. Blue lips, eyelashes jeweled with ice. "Hot tongs!" he barks to the nearest guard, who blanches and bolts. "Blanket! Clear the gatehouse!" The girl's head lolls sideways. Her breath is a moth's wing, then nothing. Rye presses gloved hands to her chest. Old training takes over. Count the beats that do not come. He swears, soft, because rage will frighten what he is trying to coax back, and pulls the glove from his right hand. The cold bites instantly, teeth to bone. He sets his bare palm over the child's sternum and closes his eyes. He thinks of the hearth in his mother's cottage, of summer bark peeled off river logs, of the small, steady flame that has survived a century inside him because he refused to let the world's winter put it out. "Come on, little one," he whispers. "Take what I have to give." Heat travels out of him in a swift wave. It leaves dizziness in its wake, a hollowing in his limbs, but beneath his hand the child jerks. A gasp rattles up from a chest that had forgotten how to rise. Color blooms painfully slow in her cheeks, a fragile sunrise. Her eyes flutter open, gray like the valley river, and fix on him as if she has been looking for him a long time. "Am I dead?" she asks, barely audible. "Not today," he says, throat tight. "Not if I can help it." They carry her to the gatehouse where a stove smokes cozily. The guards bustle awkwardly, pretending not to watch the commander cradle the child on his lap as if she is made of spun glass. He nods to the steaming bowl brought to him, blows on it, and coaxes her to drink. The feeling in his fingers returns in stabbing needles. He flexes his hand once. A rim of rime clings to his knuckles, delicate as lace. When he looks up, the queen is in the doorway. Serayne never moves with haste. She does not have to. The air makes way for her. Frost laces the threshold where she stands, gathering to greet its sovereign. Her gaze takes in the girl, the commander, the bowl in his hands. "Who brought this child inside?" she asks, addressing the room and no one in it. "I did," Rye says, rising. The girl clings, small fingers bunching his cloak. "She would have died." "The wards are not for mortals," Serayne replies, not unkindly, simply reciting a truth carved into the palace itself. "We keep them safe by keeping them out." "She is safe here," Rye says, and realizes he has stepped closer to the queen without meaning to. The guards find reasons to stare at the floor. The queen's eyes shift to his bare hand, reddened along the palm. She does not look away quickly enough. He sees it, a flicker inside the ice, a glimmer like a star behind cloud. Interest? Pain? A remembered word? "Return her," Serayne says. Her voice catches faintly. The room feels it. Escorted. Fed. No one else passes the gates. "Yes, Your Majesty," Rye answers, and the girl's fingers tighten again. He pries them gently free. "I'll carry her to the ridge and place her into her mother's arms myself." The queen's gaze slides to the window. Snow has begun to fall again, slow, wide flakes. They land and do not stick. They dampen the sill and run in thin lines of water. Water. Rye watches the realization cross her face like a crack through glass. Her gloved hand lifts as if to touch the melting. She does not. She is the seal and the law. She is winter's sovereign. She lets her hand drop. "Be quick," she says, and turns. He should bow. Instead, the oath in him burns, and a different ring of words pushes to his tongue. Dangerous, tender, alive. "My queen," he says softly. Serayne stops, the word like a warm hand against her spine. She does not look back. For a heartbeat, winter listens. The stoves tick, the girl's breath, the snow's small tapping against glass. "Do not squander what warmth you have left, Commander," she says. It is not rebuke, not exactly. It is something closer to fear. He smiles without humor. "I have more than enough." When she is gone, the room exhales. The girl sips soup and leans into him as if he is a wall she trusts not to fall. Rye glances down at his palm again. A thin crust of frost climbs his lifeline, shimmering with its own quiet light. By noon, the clouds thin to a torn shawl. Rye carries the girl through a world not quite itself. The path to the ridge is familiar. He has ridden it in blizzard and black ice, under moon and no moon. But today the snow gives way underfoot like bread still warm from the oven. The pines whisper instead of groan. In the valley below, the river glints, not ice, water moving beneath. The girl's mother meets them at the marker stones, hands shaking as she gathers the child into her arms. Gratitude spills out of her like a spring broken free, a bless you, bless you, bless you on every breath. Rai nods, embarrassed by the way praise sits poorly on his skin, and checks the line of the wards carved into rock. They hum beneath his fingertips, old power steady and subdued. But under it he feels another pulse answering from the palace towers, like a second heartbeat waking. He should report immediately. Instead, he stands there a long moment with the wind lifting his hair and the ghost of the girl's weight in his arms, and he lets his eyes close. The sun finds his lids through cloud. It paints him with weightless warmth, a kindness small enough to keep. When he returns to the palace, the corridors seem brighter, edges softened. He cannot tell if he imagines it. He shakes snow from his cloak and makes for the throne hall. Before he reaches the doors, a tremor runs through the crystal beneath his boots. The chandelier above gives a crystalline chime and sheds a dusting of frost. He pushes the doors. Serayne stands alone on the steps, one hand braced against the throne as though something has struck her from within. Light streams through the high windows in fragile spears. Light, real light, and where it touches her cheek, it refracts like fire inside ice. Her eyes meet his. There is no mask in them now, only confusion and something like wonder's shadow. Rai, she says, and the name sounds new in her mouth. He crosses the distance in 3 strides. Your Majesty? Her palm presses to her chest, fingers splayed. It hurts, she whispers, astonished. It hurts. He stares at her hand, at the way the frost around her wrist is spider-webbed with hairline cracks, at the way the very air near her seems to quiver. What hurts? He asks, though he knows. He feels it too, an ache deep under the breastbone, an ache old as prayers. My heart, she says, and the word falls heavy and impossible between them like a dropped sword. A slow drip starts somewhere, meltwater finding the floor. Outside, from very far away, a lark, long banished from these heights, gives a startled, tentative call. Rai doesn't think. He reaches for her as if she is falling. His hand stops a breath from her shoulder, the oath hammering in his bones, the law of the gods an iron circle around him. He cannot touch his queen. He cannot, not since the day the seal was forged. Her eyes drop to his outstretched fingers, raw and reddened, rimmed with rime, and then lift to his face. Commander, she says, voice barely sound, what have you done? He opens his mouth to speak the truth, that he gave warmth to a dying child and would do it again 1,000 times, that he would give warmth to her if it would not burn her. But the answer is already blooming along his lifeline, pale frost crossing flesh like script he has not learned to read. Only what you taught me, Rai says. And somewhere deep in the palace, under stone and snow, something old and holy shifts in its sleep. Morning came pale and trembling, as if the sun itself feared to trespass upon the realm of winter. For the first time in 100 years, the palace did not wake to silence. Water moved, soft, uncertain, whispering through the seams of ice like breath beneath glass. Commander Rai stood beside the Queen's chamber doors, helm under one arm. The guards stared uneasily at the damp streaks running down the crystal walls. He dismissed them with a glance and stepped inside. Serayne sat near the window, a sheet of frost glazing the floor around her. Light scattered across her hair like silver fire. Her bare palm rested against her chest, where her pulse had begun to beat again, slow, reluctant, alive. It will not stop, she murmured, eyes on the light. Every hour it grows louder. Rai bowed. Your Majesty, the thaw spreads, the lower halls drip, the stables have softened, the men fear a curse. Perhaps they are right. Her gaze lifted to him, sharp, luminous, and almost human. You touched death yesterday and brought life. You broke something sacred. I obeyed my oath, he said, to protect life, yours, and all under your rule. Her lips parted, as if to rebuke him, but the words faltered. She looked toward the melting pane instead. Outside, the snow no longer fell straight. It drifted sideways, confused by the faint wind returning to the peaks. Do you remember, she asked quietly, what warmth feels like? He hesitated. Yes, and I remember losing it. She drew in a breath. Then perhaps you understand what terrifies me. He wanted to say, I understand more than you know, but he only bowed again. That night, frost lamps flickered along the corridors, dripping wax-like tears of ice. Serayne dismissed her attendants and stood before the great mirror of frost, a relic from before the curse. Beneath its surface moved faint shadows, echoes of the world she had sealed away. Her reflection shifted. A younger woman looked back. Not the Queen of Ice, but Serayne the mortal, eyes full of sunlight, standing amid fire and ruin. She heard screams, saw rivers of flame, and the god's voice like thunder inside her skull. Give up your heart, or the world will burn. She remembered the smell of smoke, the hand that once held hers, her champion, her protector, pulling her from collapsing stone. Then the cold that rushed in as her heartbeat turned to crystal. Serayne gasped and staggered back. The mirror stilled, showing only her present self, pale, perfect, untouchable. A single tear, thin and luminous, slid down her cheek and froze before it could fall. In the training yard below, Rai drilled the frost guard beneath a bruised sky. His breath came in short white bursts. The air carried an odd sweetness. He halted mid-command as warmth tingled across his palms. When he pulled off a glove, a faint lattice of frost traced his veins, glowing faintly blue. He clenched his fist, hiding it. At dusk, a summons came. The queen wished to see him in the Hall of Seers. The chamber pulsed with runes, ancient sigils carved in ice that shimmered with inner light. 3 elder seers knelt before the throne, their faces hidden by veils of frost thread. One spoke, her voice creaking like thin ice. The seal weakens, my queen. The warmth you feel is the life you once gave away, returning. What of the commander? Serayne asked. The bond between you carries the balance. His warmth feeds the thaw. Your heart beats through him. The queen's gaze shot to Rai. He stood rigid, silent. If that is true, she said, then his nearness endangers all. The eldest seer inclined her head. Distance might slow the unraveling, but the gods are stirring already. Silence stretched. The frost lamps hissed as droplets struck the floor. Finally, Serayne rose. Commander Rai, she said, voice steady, though her hand trembled. From this night, you will remain beyond the inner halls. You will guard from afar. He bowed low. As you command. But as he turned to leave, the sound of melting echoed again, soft, persistent, like a heartbeat following them both. Outside, the storm gathered its strength anew. From the north, where the glaciers met the sky, an ancient whisper rode the wind, a voice older than kingdoms. The vessel breaks, the queen remembers. Rai looked back once at the high windows of her chamber, a faint glow moving behind the frost. His breath misted in the air, warm enough to fog his helm. He touched the scar over his heart and murmured to the snow, "Then let it be my warmth that bears the cost." Far above, within the palace, the frost cracked again, quiet, decisive, as if the heart of winter had taken another breath. Night deepened until the palace seemed carved from the sky itself. In the highest spire, the Hall of Stars lay quiet, its ceiling a dome of glass veined with frost, its floor a dark mirror. Serayne stood alone at the center, palms open, breath steady. The air smelled faintly of meltwater and distant rain, scents she had not known for 100 years. "Show me," she whispered. The dome's constellations flickered. Frost lines unspooled like threads of memory, weaving an image across the air, a plain of fire, wind bowed by heat, a sun red as an open wound. Screams tore through the vision, her people in flight, towers shimmering into ash. On a ridge above the ruin, Serayne, mortal then, crowned with ivy and light, raised both hands to the heavens. "Hear me." The world answered with thunder. The northern sky split, and something older than winter stepped through, a presence vast and glacial, its voice the grind of mountains. "I will stay the fire, child, but the balance must hold." "I will pay what is needed," she had said, heart pounding, throat raw from smoke. "Then give it," said the frost god, and touched a finger of ice to her chest. The memory crashed cold into the hall of stars. Serayne staggered, hand gripping the winter blue of her gown. Her pulse, hers, not the god's, knocked against her palm. She tasted iron. She saw a face then, not the deity's, not any enemy, but a man's face bent over her as the world tilted. A commander's cheeks streaked with soot, eyes fierce and bright with tears. He lifted her from the ground as her heart turned to crystal. She tried to say his name and could not. The vision faded. Only the dome remained, moonlight crosshatched by frost. "Rye," she said to the empty hall, the sound a breakage. "I forgot you." Below, on the north parapet, Rye walked a silent watch. The outer lamps guttered under a rising wind that smelled of brine and storm iron. The snow did not fall so much as hover, as if uncertain whether it still belonged. He flexed his fingers inside his gloves. The ache there had become a steady cold, as if frost were growing inward from his skin. He welcomed it. It meant she felt less. The first wraith arrived with the moon. It came like a sigh, a pale shape that held no weight and yet pressed the air flat. Rye sensed it before he saw it, pressure against his ribs, a memory of being a boy at sea when the tide yanked him under. Then the wraith's face formed from whirling flurries, a smooth blank mask with hollows where eyes should be, and it issued a sound like a door sealing closed. "Not tonight," Rye said, drawing steel. His blade rang true. The wraith shattered into powder that blew away without sound. Behind it, more voices woke across the ice like whispers becoming speech, and the north sky glowed with a pallid ribbon. He signaled the horn once, alert, and the frost guard took their stations along the wall. Within minutes, the night was thin with drifting forms. Swords met snowlight, runes lit along the parapet in a sudden, steady blaze. The men fought with discipline born from winters that lasted lifetimes. Yet for every wraith they cut, another drew itself from breath and cold. Rye fought to the rhythm of the oath burned into his bones. "My life for yours, my warmth for your will." He moved like a dark flame across the wall, each strike precise, each step measured. He could feel it, an answering pulse from the palace spire, a thread tying him to her even through distance. With each wraith destroyed, the frost inside his veins crept higher. A sound unlike any wind swelled from the north. It rolled over the mountains and through the palace towers until the ice itself hummed, a voice vast and layered, as if spoken by a storm. "The vessel breaks. Return what was given." Serayne heard it from the Hall of Stars. The dome trembled, the constellations blurred. She descended the spiral stairs as bells pealed, warning, warning, and the corridors shuddered with the grind of shifting ice. At the base of the tower, she found the seers kneeling, veils stiff with hoarfrost, hands pressed to the floor. "The god speaks," the eldest rasped. "If the seal fails, the flood takes all. The snows melt in a single season and drown the valleys. The balance demands." "A life," Serayne said, voice steady, though the world tilted. "Mine, or—" She could not say his name now. It lodged like glass behind her ribs. The seer lifted her veiled face, blind eyes shining with pale light. He is already taking the cold from you. The bond is set. If you die now, he dies with you. Serayne's hands curled until the bones creaked. There must be another path. The second seer spoke, voice like icicles striking stone. There is a ritual of division, ancient, half-forgotten, by which your burden may be shared between you, neither dying, each bearing half. It has never been tried under a god's gaze. The cost? Serayne asked. The cost, said the eldest, is that should one heart falter, the other will break, always, forever. Serayne's throat closed around a laugh that wasn't one. Forever ended for me a century ago. Then begin it again, the youngest whispered. A horn sounded from the parapets, a sound like a thread snapping. Serayne pivoted and strode toward the north stairs. The seers called after her, but the palace answered her will. Doors swung open before her like wakeful eyes, and the cold that had been her crown became her cloak, streaming behind as she descended. She reached the battlements to a world drowned in moonlight. Wraiths swarmed like torn banners. Men moved with the grim grace of those who know there is no retreat. At the far tower, Rai fought atop the snow-slicked steps, ringed by frostlight. He struck, spun, caught a guard as he slipped, flung a wraith into the path of another's blade, and raised his sword again without looking tired. "Commander!" a guard shouted over the din, pointing with the bloody edge of his spear. Serayne stepped from shadow onto stone. The battle stuttered. Even the wraiths seemed to pause. Rai turned, breath white and swift in the air, hair dark with blown snow. He looked at her as at a star he had navigated by, and then been told was a lie. "My queen," he said. "Enough distance," she replied, and raised a hand. Frost roared up from the tower's edge, knitting itself into a shield that curved over the north wall like the ribs of a great beast. Wraiths struck it and dissolved in showers of crystals. The strain of the spell scorched along her arms, heat, absurd and glorious, lancing through the old channels. She swayed. Rai took a step toward her and halted, remembering her command. "Come," she said, and the word loosened something in both of them. He reached her in 3 strides, close enough now that he could see it clearly. The faint blush on her cheekbones, the sheen on her lip, the crack fine as hair at the base of her throat where the old ice was thinning. "They demand a life," Serayne said. "If I bend, the realm lives and you die. If I refuse, the realm drowns, and you die anyway." "Then we don't bend," he said, simple as a blade. "Give me the cold. Share it. Let the gods rage." Her mouth trembled, not with fear, he realized, but with something like relief. "There is a ritual," she said. "It will bind us. If ever I falter, it breaks you. If you fall, I—" She swallowed. "I do not know that I could rise again." Rai lifted his hand between them, palm bare, frost lace bright in the moon. "We've already been bound by worse." For 1 heartbeat, the world held its breath. The shield shivered over their heads. The god's voice rolled again, colder, closer. "Choose." Serayne set her palm to his. Light speared through them both, silver and blue and a startling, impossible gold. Power surged from her chest like a river breaking its banks. Cold rushed from his veins to meet it, 2 halves of a broken circle closing. The wraiths screamed and blew apart like fog. The wall hummed. The runes along the tower flared awake, ancient and eager. Rai bit back a cry as ice and heat braided down his bones. Serayne's head fell forward. He caught her shoulders and held fast. For a moment they were a single point of balance between winter and everything that had ever tried to end it. The light dimmed. The shield held. Far away, thunder answered, a promise that this was not finished. Serayne lifted her face to the moon. Rai felt the new thread between them, bright and unbreakable, tugged tight in his chest. "Go," she said to the men, voice carrying. "Hold the wall. The gods can have our fear, but not our realm." Rai smiled despite the ache. "Not tonight." They turned to face the north together as the next wave rose, and for the first time since the world went cold, the wind brought with it the scent of rain. The morning after the bond, Aeloria stood very still, as if the realm balanced on the edge of a blade. For 3 blessed hours the wind gentled, and the palace breathed without pain. Meltwater threaded the courtyards, silver and shy. Children laughed in the lower city, where no child had laughed in a century. Then the sky tore. It began as a seam of white high above the northern ridges, a line too straight to be cloud. The line widened, light pouring through like the inside of a glacier turned to sun. Sound followed, a bone-deep groan, ice shifting on a god's scale, and with it a wall of cold that stunned the birds mid-flight. Rai was already running. "Strike teams to the north wall," he barked, voice carrying as the frost guard fell into formation. "Evacuation line south. Move!" Serayne stood at the highest balcony, hair lifting in the newborn wind. The seam in the sky kept opening, until the light resolved into something shaped like a crown of storm. The storm of reckoning descended, a column of whirling snow seeded with lightning, a cyclone of pale that touched the mountains and ground them smaller by a breath. Rai climbed to her side, helm under his arm, eyes on the storm. "Your Majesty?" She didn't look away. "He's coming. Then we hold." The first of the ice wraiths arrived like a spear cast from heaven, slamming into the outer wards and splintering into a dozen white shapes. Behind them trudged forms that had not walked the world since old songs. Titans of packed snow and bound glacier stone, eyes hollow and bright with godlight. "Runes!" Rai shouted. "Wake them!" Along the walls, ancient sigils flared to life. Lines of frost stitched themselves across battlements, tightening into a lattice that hummed underfoot. The wraiths hit, the runes held. Steel flashed, clean and bright. The titans swung arms big as gates. Ballistae thudded, ropes screaming as spears buried in ancient ice. Serayne raised both hands. A dome of living frost grew out from her palms, slick as water and strong as truth. The dome curved over the north wall, a cathedral of ice that turned the storm's howl into low thunder. The strain lanced through her arms, heat and cold braided together. And for an instant, she wavered. Rai was there, shoulder against hers, steady as a vow. "With me," he said, and set his palm to the frost. Warmth flowed from his touch into her magic, quiet, sure, not consuming. The dome brightened, silver at first, then with a heart of pale gold that turned the storm light gentle. For a breath, Serayne could hear only that glow, feel only the shape of his hand through the ice. The storm noticed. A voice rolled out of the torn sky, layered and distant, as if spoken by a mountain dreaming. "Vessel, you break the law. Return what was given." Serayne lifted her head. "I return nothing. I reclaim myself. Love melts, melt drowns, drown ends." Rai's laugh was quick and human. "You'd be a poet if you weren't a glacier." The titans advanced. One raised a fist, studded with black stone, and smashed it into the dome. Cracks spidered across the arch like frantic maps. Rai shifted, drawing the impact through his palm, taking the worst of it into himself. He hissed. Frost raced his veins, climbing like ivy. He didn't pull away. "Give it to me," he said through teeth. "All of it you can't carry. Give it." Serayne looked at him, at the white rim on his lashes, at the ice brightening his pulse, and wanted to command him to stop. Instead, she pressed her palm harder to his. The magic bled into him in a clean, controlled stream. The cracks steadied, held. Below, the city moved like a river. Evacuation lines flowed south under banners, mothers clutching children, old men gripping gateposts as if they could hold the world still with their hands. The frost guard throttled the streets into order, calm as surgeons. In every face a light, fear, yes, but also something electric, belief. "Another wave," a captain called, voice ragged over the wind. "Commander, the eastern ward." A titan's backhand sheared the east tower like paper. Stone avalanched, banners disappearing under white. The dome shuddered and dipped. Serayne's knees hit ice. Pain detonated along her spine. Rai caught her before she fell, hauling her against him with a gentleness that undid her bones. He set his brow to hers, the world narrowing to the small bridge of touch where they were still warm. "Breathe," he said. "Look at me." She did. The storm roared. The dome held because they held. "Move the southern quarter first," Serayne said, voice low but even as she rose, gathering power again. "Send word to the river crews. Cut channels now, not later." "Aye," Rai gestured, and runners sprinted, feet sure on shivering stone. Light knifed down from the seam, too fast to track, an ice-light bolt that would have split the wall and the palace and the city to its marrow. Serayne flung up her hand. Rai stepped with her, palm still on the domed frost, and together they turned the bolt aside. It struck the frozen lake beyond the gates. Steam screamed up, a pillar of fog and shattered ice. Rai staggered. The frost on his neck thickened, whitening his skin. His pulse fluttered against Serayne's fingers, where she braced him. "No," she breathed, fury and terror mingling. "No, you will not take him." She reached down into the old places in herself, the hollow aisles where the curse had been stored, and found there not emptiness, but a thin spring of living warmth. It felt like the first time she'd held a flame as a girl and learned it would not bite. She guided that warmth into the dome, along Rai's palm, back into the lattice of runes singing underfoot. For a breath, the storm faltered. "You defy balance," the god said, voice quieter now, closer. "You refuse the shape we gave you." Serayne looked up into the seam, into the bright. Balance was a shape without a heart. "I am done with it." The god paused, as if learning the taste of a new word. Around them, titans crumbled under focused fire, wraiths shredding to glitter on the dome's curve. The frost guard roared once, savage and joyful. The city's bells answered, not in panic, but in call and response, as if the whole realm were saying yes. Rai swayed. He didn't let go. "He's not stopping." "He will speak to me," Serayne said, and straightened to her full height on the shivering wall. The crown that had been frost the day she surrendered her heart reformed above her in a ring of breath and light, not cold now, but clear. She lifted both hands and parted the dome. Wind rushed in wild and salt-sweet. The seam in the sky yawned overhead, dazzling. The god's presence bore down like a weight beyond gravity, vast, impersonal, terrible. "Frost Father," Serayne called, voice clean as snowmelt. "I come to the altar you made in me. If judgment must fall, let it fall where you can see my face." For the first time, the storm hesitated. Beside her, Rai's knees buckled. He went down hard, catching himself on one palm. Frost raced the lines of his hand and bloomed across his wrist like a bracer. Serayne's breath shattered. She knelt, cupping his cheek, not caring that the world watched, that the god watched. His skin was cool as a river at night. He tried to smile for her and almost managed it. "We buy time," he whispered, and the frost at the corner of his mouth cracked like sugar. "You climb." Her throat burned. "You won't survive another surge." "I didn't survive the last 100 years. I waited." He took her wrist, pulse to pulse. "Go." The sky boomed once, impatient. Serayne rose. To the captains she said, "Hold the city. Keep the channels open. If the dome fails, fall back to the river's cut and run south." Then to Rai, quiet, fierce, "I will end this." She stepped to the parapet's edge and drew a path of ice in the air, stairs spiraling toward the seam like a pale ladder. Wind tore at her cloak. The dome flexed and sang. Below, the bells kept ringing. She looked back once. Rai stood with one hand on the dome, one on his sword, frost up to his forearm now, eyes bright as a winter star. He nodded, once, the way he had in 100 battles when words were wind, and grinned a little despite the pain. "Go show a god what a heart looks like," he said. Serayne climbed into the storm. The world above the clouds was pure white light. Wind shrieked like steel drawn from scabbards. Shards of frozen lightning drifted weightless through the air. Serayne climbed until there was no up, no down, only radiance and cold, so deep it rang like sound. The steps dissolved beneath her feet, leaving her standing on nothing. And then the voice filled everything. "You return, vessel." The frost god appeared as a column of storm-given shape, eyes like glaciers turning. Within that light, she glimpsed the battlefield of her memory, the moment her mortal heart had hardened into ice. "I come to end what you began," Serayne said. "You were to preserve the balance. You have unbound it. Balance without mercy is tyranny." The god's aura pulsed, throwing her back a step. "You love, you burn. You melt the order that saved your world." "Then I melt it." Her breath steamed silver. "Let the world be born again with a heart." A flicker below. Rye, a figure on the wall still holding the dome, frost to his throat. His strength poured through the bond between them, a living tether in the gale. The god extended a hand of storm. "Return the heart and rest." Serayne shook her head. "It is mine." Lightning cracked. The god struck. Pain blazed through her body, pure cold, burning bright. She staggered but did not fall. Rye's voice reached her across the impossible distance. "You're not alone." She turned, finding him through the link. His eyes shone through the blizzard, steady as dawn. And in that instant, she understood. The god's power flowed through her heart, but the love anchoring it was his. He was the vessel now, the living balance. "Enough," she said, and raised both hands. "If a price must be paid, let it be shared." The bond ignited. Gold bled through the storm's blue, warmth streaking the heavens. The god screamed, soundless, endless, as the light of two mortal souls met the cold of eternity. Rye collapsed on the battlements, body turning to glass. The storm stuttered. Snow stopped mid-air, glittering. Serayne fell to her knees on the empty sky. "Take me, not him." "The choice is made," the god said, voice fading. "You asked for balance. He carries it now." The storm imploded, folding in on itself like a wound closing. The seam sealed with a sigh, leaving only silence and sunlight breaking through for the first time in an age. Serayne plunged, falling through brightness, through air and snow, until the world rushed up to meet her. The palace spires shone beneath, domes melting into silver rivers. She landed in the courtyard amid soft drifts that hissed with warmth. Rye stood where the wall had been, frozen mid-stride, a sculpture of clear crystal. His sword still raised, his eyes open, calm. Serayne crawled to him, hair plastered with meltwater, and pressed her hand to the glass that was his chest. Beneath her palm, no beat, only light trapped inside like a star in amber. She bowed her head against him. "You kept your oath, my life for yours, my warmth for your will. But I will find you in the thaw." Around them, the dome shattered and dissolved into mist. Bells began to ring, slow, uncertain, then sure. The people of Aeloria spilled into the streets, gazing upward at a sky the color of dawn instead of ash. The long winter was ending. The storm was gone. For the first time in living memory, the air above Aeloria tasted clean, not sharp or biting, but soft with the scent of thawing earth. The snow did not fall now. It melted, running in thin silver streams down marble steps and into the valley like tears released after too long held. Serayne walked through her ruined palace barefoot. The frost beneath her feet was slick and alive, humming faintly as if uncertain what it should become. Her reflection followed her along the mirrored halls. No crown of ice, no glow in her eyes, only a woman with wet hair, pale shoulders, and a heartbeat that did not belong to gods. Where the great throne had stood, there was nothing but water pooling in the hollow where her sacrifice had burned through. The frost crystal spires drooped, dripping steadily. Each drop struck the puddles like a small clock tick, marking the end of an age. Outside, the bells still rang. They did not mourn. They called. The people had returned from the southern hills at dawn, walking in disbelief through streets once sealed by ice. Crops that had been frozen mid-growth now stood, green shoots trembling. Rivers that had slept under glass now ran laughing through their banks. Even the mountains seemed to exhale. Mist curled around their flanks like breath after a long sleep. In the palace courtyard, beneath the sun that now dared to shine, stood the statue of the protector. Rai, immortalized in crystal, sword planted point down, head slightly bowed. Sunlight caught the facets of his armor and scattered rainbows across the garden stones. Serayne approached him each morning, each time the same way. Slow steps, a folded cloak over her arm, the hem of her dress wet with dew. She would brush melting snow from his shoulders and speak softly to him as she once had to her gods. "Do you hear them?" she whispered one morning, palm on the cold plain of his cheek. "The children laugh again. The rivers sing, all because you would not let go." She smiled faintly. "The seers say the cold still answers me, that I could command it if I wished, but I will not. Let winter sleep. I would rather remember you as warmth." At her feet, the earth darkened where the frost receded. Small green blades pushed through. She bent, surprised, and touched one. Its life was real, its color fierce. A single snowflower bloomed beside it, white as memory and clean as forgiveness. Weeks passed. The people rebuilt walls, raised sails on rivers that had never seen open water. Aeloria began to smell of wood smoke, bread, and promise. The queen moved among them without guards or crown, her hair braided with simple ribbons of thawed silk. They called her the living queen. But every evening she returned to the courtyard when the bells tolled sunset, and always the air there felt a little warmer. Sometimes she fancied she saw a flicker of light inside the crystal, a heartbeat caught between worlds. She never dared speak of it aloud, fearing hope might frighten it away. On the 99th morning after the storm, she came with a bowl of water drawn from the river newly born of snowmelt. She knelt before him, hands trembling, and washed the dust from his fingers as if performing a coronation. "You gave everything," she murmured. "If the gods meant to keep you, they should have frozen my tears as well." One tear slipped free, falling onto his hand. It sank into the crystal without a mark. A sound followed, a small, clean crack, like the breaking of thin ice in spring. Serayne looked up sharply. Sunlight streamed through the courtyard gate, catching the facets of his armor. The rainbow shimmer deepened. The air stirred, warm as breath. She rose slowly. The crack widened. Beneath her hand, the crystal pulsed once, faint and sure. Her own heart answered. The bells began to ring again, not in warning or mourning this time, but in celebration, spontaneous, unstoppable, the sound of a realm remembering joy. Serayne's eyes filled with light. "Come back to me," she whispered. "It's spring." Morning mist drifted through the garden like memory. The snow had retreated to the mountains, yet Serayne still rose before dawn, drawn by habit or by the ache that refused to fade. She crossed the courtyard in silence. Dew clung to her skirts. The air smelled of damp stone and the faint sweetness of thawed earth. Around her, vines climbed the marble arches, green and reckless, but she did not look at them. Her gaze was for him alone. Rai stood where the storm had ended, mid-stride, sword lifted in eternal defense, cloak frozen in motion behind him like a banner caught in wind. The light of dawn poured through the crystal that held him, scattering rainbows across the garden stones. He looked forever ready to protect her, even against the dawn itself. Serayne laid a hand against the ice. It was cool, never cruel. "I've rebuilt what we lost," she whispered. "The rivers are free, the people laugh, but I—" Her voice caught. She pressed her lips together until the tremor passed. "I do not laugh as they do. My warmth stays here." She lingered, fingers tracing the outline of his jaw through the translucent surface. For a moment, she let herself imagine he could feel it, that somewhere inside he remembered the sound of her voice. "I once told you winter would sleep," she murmured, "but I lied. It sleeps inside me still. Every night when the wind turns, I wake and think it's you." A tear slid down her cheek. It wasn't the helpless kind, just quiet, human. It struck the ice and sank, joining the faint golden veins that pulsed inside. The ground answered first. A subtle tremor like the heartbeat of the earth, then a sound, soft, hesitant, the whisper of frost surrendering. Cracks unfurled along his arm, spider-fine and glimmering. Serayne froze, breath held. Light swelled beneath the surface, warm as dawn through water. The cracks widened. Shards slipped free like petals from glass. She stepped back, hands trembling, half afraid to believe. Rye drew a single breath. The sound was small, ordinary, and it broke her completely. He looked at her through the falling shards, eyes clear, voice raw as the first wind of spring. "You kept your promise." Serayne laughed then, a short, broken sound that turned to a sob halfway through. She pressed her hand to his chest, feeling the steady pulse beneath, real and sure. "Welcome back," she whispered. "I was beginning to forget how to breathe." He caught her fingers and raised them to his lips, the warmth of his skin startling after so much cold. "Then breathe," he said softly. "We have all the seasons ahead." The garden filled with light. Snow drifted from a sky gone pale blue, not cold now, only beautiful. Around them, the first blossoms opened, releasing a scent the realm had forgotten. Serayne leaned into him, eyes closing as his arms wrapped around her. Together they stood while bells rang through Aeloria, clear, bright, alive. She gave her heart to save a kingdom. He gave his to save hers. And when the frost broke, love became the season that never ended. If you like this story, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps this channel grow. Thanks for watching.